Calling from a 214 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 214. Gone. Calling from a 308. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 308. Okay. I hope this isn't me. Calling from a 614 area. 614. 614.
Hello?
Hello?
Oh, Jesus Christ. Am I coming through? Okay.
Yes, you're here.
Okay, I'm Eldon from Australia. Actually, I really did not expect to get through. I've been calling for like 6 months and I've never been answered once. But okay. So I don't really know what to. I guess
This
I'll.
just became a habit for you, and you decided just to keep calling, even though you had nothing specific to say.
Oh, I've had specific stuff to say, but most of those, like, it's become less relevant over time, and then it just became habitual now. Yeah. The last thing I really wanted to say was that, this is some time ago though now, but here in Australia, a very hated Minister of the Interior, Peter Dutton, got infected with COVID. Actually, like, I think you probably got this news over there that he infected a few people.
Yeah.
I was really hoping that he would fucking die, but he didn't die. So
well,
that's really the last thing that
I understand.
Oh, sorry for swearing, by the way.
That's all right. It's a lovely sentiment.
Yeah.
But Boris Johnson is in the hospital with COVID. So I don't know if that helps.
Nobody who's got this thing who really deserves to die is going to die. So it's just, let's not even hope. Anyway, so I've been tuning in, Sam, and I'm not exactly young, but I'm not really that old either. Like, I'm nearly 40, and I've been involved in politics for quite some time in my end of the world. I've lived actually in the United States. I've lived there for some time too, and I was involved sort of peripherally, a bit of activism over there with some friends, with some colleagues of mine. And I keep hearing, you guys have a very, you in particular, Sam, I don't know if it's because of your age, but you seem very hopeful about working within the system. I mean, I personally did really never expect Bernie to win. Like, I mean, he got pretty close and I was a bit surprised, but the way you're really earnest about his chances, and the guy who just called in before, who was like, what are we going to do? We're just giving out really serious. The Democratic Party, much like the ALP here, the Australian Labor Party here, I don't really, this is of course my opinion, but they don't really care about anything that's outside of the little cultural bubble. I mean, you guys understand that. I mean, the one sort of major policy effort that they've really taken seriously, that I can really think of, is really abortion. And that's because, which is important. And I imagine that's because within the Democratic Party, women have become quite a lot more emancipated than any, but outside of that little really narrow scope, like, unless it affects that very narrow PMC class, I don't really see them really taking interest. This morning, people were shocked about something that Tom Perez said about talking to AIPAC, I think it is, and about how the Democrats are not going to move at all, apparently, on Palestinian rights. And could you help me out here? Like, I don't really, that's really surprising. I'm actually from a Muslim background myself. My father's from Egypt. And so we paid a lot of attention to Palestine over time. Like, and I've, back when a lot of people weren't really paying attention to politics, I was bawling my eyes out over Lebanon being bombed. And I've just, do people really actually hold out hope for this kind of, is that what's going on?
Well, I mean, I think it would be, um, I mean, I don't know what the other option is. I mean, like,
Right.
and I can tell you that I was in Israel. If you're talking about the 1980 bombing of Lebanon,
No, I'm talking about the more recent one. I think 2004. I think it was.
um,
When,
I mean,
the reason
I listen. Tom Perez
yeah,
is the head of the DNC. Like when you say the
yeah,
Democrats and the PMC, I mean, like I understand what these words are, but you're not being terribly specific. And yes, Bernie Sanders had a chance to win. He didn't win in part because I don't know, a myriad of things. I don't know if I'm sure part of it was at a crucial point the campaign turned left when they should have turned right. I'm not talking ideologically, I'm just saying in terms of tactics. Um and or maybe it was just really bad luck, or Obama stepped in, did some negotiating, brought people on board in an early fashion that was completely unanticipated. So yes, Bernie had a legitimate chance to win. I personally, I mean, this is where I am less maybe hopeful than you, is that I wasn't convinced that his winning the presidency would have the impact that people some people thought, frankly. I mean, he was my favorite candidate, and then I think I think they gave the best opportunity for some wholesale change, but I was a little bit more skeptical about what he would be able to do once in office. But I mean, what is the option? Like where I'm sitting here from my perspective, I can't comment on Australian politics. But I'm sitting here from my perspective, and there are going to be, I don't know how many extra, 10,000, 15,000, 20,000 extra people, maybe more, who are going to die because of Donald Trump and the Republican Party. As bad as Joe Biden is in terms of policies that I disagree with, there is no doubt in my mind that their handling of this would have been different than Trump. There's no doubt in my mind. And that if that Joe Biden had done as bad of a job of it, that the Democratic Party would not be in lockstep with him in the way that they are. And I'm not even necessarily saying that's as a compliment in some respects. It's just a different, they just organize themselves in a different fashion so that there are some functions of government that are indisputably better. Right now, Donald Trump did not allow for the expansion of Obamacare. And if you've listened to this program for any extended period of time, you know that I have been critical of this, of the limits of Obamacare for a decade now. But Donald Trump had the ability to expand Obamacare, expand Medicaid, to open up the enrollment period, and refused to do it. To get people health insurance, so just so that they're not even worrying about stuff. Never mind whether they need it right now. Just said one thing to get off the table. Mm-hmm. These are material benefits to people. Are they where I want them to be? No. But are they better? Yes. Will they save lives? Undoubtedly. I mean, I could go on. We could talk about expansion of, apparently Mnuchin narrowed or I should say expanded on the exceptions of people who had to pay paid leave for companies, basically knocking out about another 40% of the country. So it's not only 70% of the country has exceptions as to whether they can get paid leave. I'm quite convinced the Democratic president wouldn't do that, regardless of who it was. Would Bernie Sanders be far more generous and aggressive in this situation than Joe Biden? Without a doubt. Well, would Elizabeth Warren? In my mind, without a doubt. There is a difference. And when you're talking about even marginal differences, when you're talking about a country of 300 million people, if the idea is to lessen suffering as measured by how many people suffer and to what extent, I'm sorry, there's just like, your perspective is disempowering and leads to more suffering. That's just a reality. I mean, I agree with your assessment. I agree with the limitations of the Democratic Party, but to say, therefore, like it's quaint that you're fighting over these 5 yards or these 10 yards or these inches, I find that to be completely disempowering. That's not politics. That's just, I don't know. It's just, preening.
Well, yeah, I mean, I can understand that, but on the other way of looking at it is that you could be attempting to, one could attempt to derail the system by
how are you going to derail the system?
Participating in it.
As you know, how does lack of participation derail the system?
Actually compelled. Sorry, what was that?
How does lack of participation derail the system? Or I'm not saying that people shouldn't go out and protest. I mean, when there's any type of labor action, we're promoting it. I mean, I think we encourage protests. Obviously, there's a limitation to that right now.
This is probably a bit of a cultural difference, actually, because in Australia, if you choose, because voting here is compulsory, so if you choose not to, actually, the topic's starting to come up that government legitimacy is actually being eroded because fewer people of my generation and below are turning out to vote, actually, despite the fact that it is compulsory. So they're just taking the fines, which I suppose for a lot of people in our establishment could be quite alarming, but I suppose the calculus is probably a bit different for the United States.
It's completely different. They don't want you to vote here. That is there is every obstacle to voting. I mean, the Republican Party has forced a primary tomorrow in Wisconsin in the middle of a pandemic. They will not, they're suing to stop the extension of 5 days of the absentee ballots. I mean, in terms of voting, by not voting, all you're doing is doing their work. And it doesn't just exist with the Republican Party. Like I can tell you, the establishment of the Democratic Party, when it comes time to primaries, they don't want people voting either because the incumbents don't want people to vote. I mean,
yeah.
I don't know any other response to this other than to continue to fight. And that I'm not limiting what that fight is. I don't think it's, exclusively or primarily electoral. But to say if I sit this one out, it's going to do something. There's absolutely zero evidence in the history of this country that has been effective. Zero.
Well, what do you think of? I think I'm not sure what show. If I was watching TMBS, or if it was this, but what do you think of Michael's assessment the other day that America is essentially a failed state? Believe me, by the way, I believe that Australia is actually probably sooner than later going to end up a completely failed state. But what do you think of Michael's?
I mean, to be honest with you, I didn't hear it, but so what?
Right.
Okay, it's a failed state. Now what? I mean, I don't care. Right. It is the only state that I live in, and so okay, it's a failed state. I don't even know what that means. It doesn't matter to my assessment as to what we should do. What would I do differently if this was not a failed state versus a failed state?
Well, I suppose it would be more localism than really paying attention to federal politics.
Yeah. All right. Good luck with that.
Good luck with
that. Good luck with that. I mean, do we need a better example of the importance of federalism than we've had in the past couple of weeks? Is New York State supposed to have a massive supply of ventilators? Is New York State supposed to have a pandemic team in China? Is New York State supposed? I mean, that is that what you're saying?
Well, I mean, the thing is that they weren't prepared for this pandemic, so presumably they weren't prepared, regardless of Trump being there.
No.
And so Biden's,
Why weren't we prepared? Because Trump removed the head.
Oh, that's right. He removed the.
Destroyed the entire apparatus that was supposed to warn us in advance about this. The entire apparatus destroyed. And then when it came time to, Airbridge Supplies, I got a story right here. So I don't know if you watched this the other day, but we played a clip of a general who was being asked a question of a reporter. Explain to us, like, what's going on with this so-called Airbridge of supplies that they have sourced around the globe, personal protection equipment. And the guy said, yeah, we found it. We're flying them in. And then we're giving it to 6 to 8 distributors that are, my job's not to mess up the supply chain and screw up the market. And then they are basically running auctions to hand out this stuff. Some of it's going back to Europe. Some of it's going anywhere, wherever, whoever's got the highest amount of money. No coordination as to where the greatest need is. This is all done with U.S. taxpayer dollars that sourced all this stuff. They're getting the markups, and it's basically price gouging. Now, I want you to listen to this story, okay? This is from Politico from a week and a half ago. A longtime Republican fundraiser sent an email to his clients on Thursday. This is from March 27th, abruptly announcing that he would no longer be working for them. Over the last 14 days, I have built another business outside of politics, and I will be focusing my full attention there. He wrote on this email, which was obtained by Politico. The fundraiser, Mike Gula, started a new company, Blue Flame Medical, formed Monday in Delaware, according to state records. The website says it sells coronavirus testing kits, N95 respirator masks, and a wide selection of personal protective equipment and other hard-to-find medical supplies to beat the outbreak. How is this guy, who had no relationship whatsoever to medical supply business, has launched a company within a week and a half, 2 weeks ago? All his attachments were just political. He was a political fundraiser. Asked how he'd managed to procure such equipment when there are shortages in hospitals across the country, Gula said, I have relationships with a lot of people. He started Blue Flame. Was it with a medical professional? No, it was with John Thomas, a consultant who until recently worked as a chief strategist for Don Sedgwick, a Republican who ran against Katie Porter. Thomas declined to specify how he and Gula had managed to obtain masks that have become so rare. It's just relationship based, he said. I can't say anything else. We're incredibly sensitive to price gouging, however, he said. Thomas said Blue Flame had already sold medical supplies to authorities in Georgia and other states. Police departments are almost begging for supplies, he said. How much you want to bet there was also international places that he sold this to? I don't want to overstate, but we probably represent the largest global supply chain for COVID-19 supplies right now. We're getting ready to fill 100 million unit mask orders. How do you think that they're doing this? How do you think these two guys have the ability to get the largest global supply for COVID-19 supplies up and running in 8 days? It is because the president of the United States has instructed our military to provide for these guys stuff so they can go and turn around and sell it, so much so that they're quitting their jobs and starting a new company, because he said he started Blue Flame in part because he wanted to leave behind the pressures of political work. I just want to live a private life. I want to get out of politics. This is robbery. This is robbery. And the fact that they are not supplying our medical personnel with equipment based upon need, but rather on their own profit, these people should go to jail. The people who enabled them should go to jail. So the idea that we're a failed state, yes, that's problematic. But the idea that that's going to change my assessment as to whether I say, Democrats, you should be doing oversight. Attorney generals in New York, you should be digging into this. Attorney generals in every state around the country. It doesn't matter. To say it's a failed state, fine. Great. What am I going to do for the rest of the show? I mean, honestly, it's like that. It's just preening. I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit what you call this. This is the way it's always been. Fine. I don't care. But to say at the point, the response is like, just going to check out. I'm going to sit over here on the sideline. I'm going to theorize about this. I mean, what's that going to do you? What's that going to do me? What's that going to do people? What's that going to do the doctors who are working, who are exposing themselves to it?
We are actually on the timeline. Like, we're looking at a 2.5 degree raise in temperature in about 10 years. It's almost guaranteed to be a lot larger than that as well.
I agree.
So, I mean, once climate change starts to strike, Democrats, at least Democrats, I mean, internationally, most sort of putatively center-left parties in the English-speaking world, they don't want to touch any of that shit. They want to wait until whole countries are underwater and mass immigration starts. That's going to bring with it diseases of its own.
I agree.
And different autocracies, on top of autocracies. So, I mean, what are we, we're still going to be kind of...
well, let me ask you this. Let me just ask you this, okay? I can agree with everything you're saying, except for, like, what is you not voting in Australia going to do? Like, how are you, give me an example of what you're talking about that's going to break up the state.
That there are cultural differences. In Australia, I think a little, establishment figures quite a lot more than it would in the United States. I mean, especially since it means it's a financial hit, like it's illegal. I mean, albeit not that serious, but, it is a fine and a potential call to court.
Right. So what do you suggest you've been following U.S. politics. What do you suggest? What's the response that...
In the United States, I really, the left-wing political response would be, I guess, really highly atomized. I mean, it would be highly localized. I wouldn't really know.
How is the highly localized response going to stop climate change? How is the highly atomized...
It would be an effective response. No.
How would the highly atomized response in the United States stop the federal government? Like, I mean, if we're going to play this out, right? Like, okay, fine, you won't be able to stop global climate change by being highly atomized and localized, but you can create a new system for when the crap hits the fan. Great. And how is that locally atomized thing going to keep itself to retain that system in light of these massive throngs of people who theoretically could be, refugees from, the South? I mean, how is that going to work?
I wouldn't know.
Yeah, I wouldn't know either. I can't even come up. Let me put it this way: as a writer
there would be no plan for any of this from any side.
Right.
I mean, you couldn't plan fully.
No, I understand.
No one could be.
You and I can't even come up with a theoretical idea as to how that's going to work. And
if we want to play through this just theoretically, I would say that it would end up with the balkanization of the United States, and probably it would break apart. And states in different regions would probably form together to form new states, and that would be it. And it would be a cultural divide.
And so some of them, right, and some of them will be failed states very quickly. Some of them will be more aggressive.
Yeah.
And that balkanization will just create more war, and that's it. All right.
Yeah. Listen, that might actually happen eventually anyway.
It could. But it's not, it's like, all right. I mean, listen, I'm here doing this because I think there is a purpose and that there's a point to fighting this. I'm not just here to do color commentary for the dissolution.
What economics is, right?
And so, I mean, I think there's at the very least some harm reduction that can take place en route to that inevitability, if that's what it is. But so I appreciate the call. I love to hear from people from Australia. And, but, I don't know. I think like, okay, it's a failed state. That's great. So what? Nobody gets a cookie. I appreciate the call.
I think on TMBS we do go into a bit more of that, but I would say localism should be more than sitting on hold for 6 months. But
well, I mean,
that's not going to stop the greatest corporate heist in history,
right? And it's not. Listen, none of this stuff is mutually exclusive. You don't I think that localism is important. I think you need to be able to help people on the ground level. I mean, I know that we need broader government policy for a lot of things, but without a doubt, people can organize where they are. But I don't see why these things are mutually exclusive at all. And I just like, okay, it's a failed state. Great. I mean, that and a quarter. I don't know. Are there still phone booths? That and a quarter won't even get you a phone, a pay phone. I mean, it's fine. Okay. But, I mean, has there ever been a time,